right, everybody, it's been a long day, but I hope a very productive one. And it is, in closing the first day of Meridian, I am so pleased to present our next and final speaker, Denelle Dixon, the Executive Director of the Stellar Development Foundation. So thank you all very much, and let's give a really warm welcome to Denelle.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm back, as they say. So I thought I would start by just mentioning that I joined SDF 6 months ago last Friday. So it's been a journey. For me, I can't believe that it's been 6 months, and yet at the same time, I can't believe that it's only been 6 months. So there's a lot that I've learned about all of the work that you're doing, a lot that I've learned about Stellar, and it's been pretty phenomenal. So I worked at Mozilla for 7 years. And at Mozilla, which is my role just prior to this, I was the Chief Operating Officer. I did a lot of work focused on the open web, focused on ensuring that governments didn't have access to technology with backdoors, talking about encryption and privacy, and all of these issues that are core tenets to the open web, transparency. And so when Jed came to talk to me, and he talked to me about this role as Executive Director and CEO, I thought I had to reflect on how all those things that I'm so passionate about openness and transparency and fighting for the rights of the humans that actually use the content side of the web, if all of those things could be equally translated over here to what we're doing here at SDF and what we're doing with Stellar. And good news is, it is. So it's been a pretty wonderful transition for me to see all of the work that has already been done, and frankly, a lot of the work that's done with respect to blockchain technology, it doesn't get highlighted enough. I don't know if that's because of fear or ignorance, because of what regulators are concerned about, or because of history. But one thing I'll have to say is that I think now's the time. We need to actually really focus on getting more regulators involved and understanding what we're doing with blockchain. Now is the time for us to come together and to develop this community and to get all those out there to become part of it. I actually love one part of what I've done over the last 6 months in particular, which is talking to those folks who have concerns about blockchain and about Stellar in particular, those naysayers out there that don't really maybe understand the technology. And one thing I'll say is that you can overcome a lot of those concerns when you have facts, when you have evidence, and when you have momentum. And I think we have all of that here. And so I've had a lot of success talking to folks, maybe even some of those folks that I wanted to bring on to SDF to be part of what we're doing here, to really engage them in the value that we have in this ecosystem and what we can do, and what actually Stellar and blockchain generally can deliver, not just in financial services, but outside of it. So the underlying tenets of the internet, all those things that I really fought so hard for the last 15, 17 years, I think they're actually more true in this space than in any other right now. Standards, openness, the focus on not creating trust through contracts, but creating trust through transparency. Creating trust that exists because you can actually see, touch, and feel. Those are the things that the internet was based on. You know, back in the day with security, they used to talk about, you don't have to trust me, you can audit the code. The same is true in this space, even more so today than it is on the content side of the web. And that's really exciting to me. And I think as a result of that, we just have so much that we can do in this space, but we have to continue to focus on interoperability, standards, openness, transparency, because if we do that, it's really hard to fight against the work that we're trying to get here. So I want to just mention again, I talked this morning a little bit about SDF as a role as the connector, as the bringing folks together, the convener. And because of the growth of Stellar and what we've done here as a collective, it feels a lot like we're able to do that not just through things like Meridian, but through all of our work. And so I reflected a lot on the role of Stellar as we think about like what it is that we're doing here, what it is that the role of the Stellar Development Foundation is as we get through this. And I think it's really important to talk about Stellar Development Foundation itself instead of Stellar. Because many of you know that we shepherd the code base, that we do lots of things, but many of you probably don't know the details of what SDF is. And so I thought maybe I would go into that a little bit. First, we're a nonprofit. Why is that important? We don't have shareholders. Why is that important? There is not one person who can actually benefit and who actually gets a dividend or a payout with respect to anything that the SDF does. That's important because that should build trust too. So that's a really important fact that I want you to think about. The other thing is, we're a taxpayer. We actually pay taxes in the state of California and at the federal government. And we're not a charity. And finally, all of the capital that we have at the SDF is actually used to support and make Stellar, the network, successful. So we talk about this as no shareholder value, no dividends, no EBITDA, no stock price focus, none of those things that you talk about when you talk about corporate America. We don't have those things. All we have to think about is making Stellar the global payment standard. That's our daily goal. That's our quarterly goal. That's our annual goal. That's our only goal. So what we do is each of these things. We spend our time building and supporting Stellar in the ecosystem. We create awareness and education around Stellar. And we develop and support Stellar use cases. So these are the things that we do today. Some we've actually done better than others, but this is what we focus on. We have, it says 54, it's actually wrong. We have 55. We just hired, and he starts on Wednesday, our Chief Marketing Officer, which I know many of you have been clamoring for us to get. We just hired him. He starts on Wednesday, so it's 55. These are some of the titles of the employees at the SDF. We're across 8 countries. We have an office in San Francisco. We have an office in Brooklyn, New York. And we have people who are located either as contractors and employees all over the world. And this is important because our work is representative of what all of these people all over the world do. We want to be here for a really long time, supporting all of your work. And so this is something that I think it's good for you to know so that you can access us, you can talk to us. We have folks that are focused on integration alone, and these are important jobs and important roles for the SDF to play. So now, let's talk about the role of the SDF in the ecosystem. And I did talk a little bit about that as the convener and the connector. And I mentioned Meridian. And I really do think of the work that we do as bringing the whole globe together. So bringing all of you together to be able to focus on the work that we have ahead of us, which is really creating Stellar as the global payment standard. So there are things that we think through about what is our role today? Like, how important is the SDF to the ecosystem? And I'm going to tell you that the role of SDF 5 years ago is very different than the role it has today. We're no longer at the center of the ecosystem, which is super awesome. And this is one of the representations, the vote that occurred on October 28th regarding the inflation mechanism is an important example of demonstrating the decentralization of the network, but also the role that SDF plays. We actually spent time looking at the dev forums. We saw the conversations in Reddit on Keybase. And it's our role to sort of take the output from that and make a proposal, which is what we did. And then the vote happened on October 28th, and it fundamentally changed Stellar, the network. And it was really cool. because it definitely shows that feedback loop and how that feedback loop works. We heard what you had to say. We put a proposal out based on the feedback, and the network, the validators, accepted that proposal. Another important way to determine our role is to think about Franklin Templeton. We learned about Franklin Templeton's plans to build a mutual fund on Stellar, not from them. We got it from a Google alert, of all things. And it demonstrates, for me, it was one of the more exciting days because it was like, this is the way that this should work. Things like this should happen without people having to come to meet with us and figure things out. That means that our documentation is better. It means that they have determined the value of Stellar on their own. That's exactly the kind of thing that we want to see in a decentralized network. And then if you look at the nodes and just think about the validator networks today, 2 years ago, we couldn't pull our validators off the network because it wouldn't continue to run. Today, it can. And this is going to get even better and better as things progress. So from our standpoint, this is a pretty cool place for us to be. And our role is really solidified by all of you and the work that all of you have done as that convener, as that connector. So as we started to think about all these things, think about our role, we came together to think about what are the next 10 years and what does that look like for SDF? And how do we actually ensure that we're doing our job, which is to make Stellar successful, to make it the payment standard? So, not surprisingly, in doing this work, we had to reflect on what's working and what hasn't worked as much as we would have liked. So what is working is our tech. It's scalable. You guys are all contributing to it. Our people. We've built an awesome team of folks who are not only committed to the mission for SDF, but are committed to Stellar. And that's awesome. Our community building. Look at Meridian. You guys all came here to Mexico City to join us to celebrate all the work that you have done. Many excellent and promising projects like IBM, Oxio, Reality Bits, Satoshi Pay, Lobster, StellarX, so many more. And our focus on decentralization. As I just went through, we feel like we've actually kind of cracked that nut. So what hasn't been working so much? Our marketing. Some of you may say, what marketing? So we just hired our CMO. Yay! It's not marketing for SDF. It's marketing for Stellar. Marketing for all of you. Partnership marketing as well as network marketing. Our policy and our focus on regulatory efforts. We've done so much better over the last 6 to 8 months. And we're going to get so much better. We have a general counsel now who's focused on this, and we also are hiring a head of policy who's going to be focused on that from a global standpoint. Our Lumen distribution through grants and airdrops. We've seen some pretty awesome results, and yet we still hold a lot of lumens. So from our standpoint, it's not working as well as we'd like. And our transparency around SDF. Now, tried to fix some of that today, but you can't just do it once and let it sit there. We got to continue that. So we're going to focus a lot more on telling you more about what we're doing with the capital that we have. That wasn't me. And about what we're doing just holistically as an organization. That's our commitment to you. So in reflecting on all of this and thinking about the 10 years, we really refocused our mission. I mentioned this earlier today. Creating equitable access to the global financial system. It's an awesome mission, as I mentioned. I mean awesome in the sense that it's big. But we're committed to it. And we want to use not just Stellar, but all of the work that you guys have done to make this happen. And as we reflected on it, we also thought about what are some of the pillars that we need to put in play to help us to say, yes, this is the thing that we should do. And then to help us to say, nope, we shouldn't do this thing. It's not consistent with what we need to focus on. So we put these pillars together, and we're going to flesh them out as an organization in more detail so that we can put our own sort of goals and operational support behind them. But this is how we want to be seen We want to be the blockchain that people know and trust, not for our own good, but for the good of all of you. We want you to be comfortable building on it and knowing that you're going to be able to answer to whatever regulatory bodies you need to answer to. We want you to feel comfortable knowing that you can trust the network and that therefore you can tell others too. We want to ensure robustness and usability of Stellar. Robustness encapsulates so many things: security, stability, scalability, all of those pieces. Foster and develop real, sustainable Stellar use cases. So some of these we'll do ourselves, and a lot of them you're going to do. And we're going to help you. And we're going to help you in ways that we have. We're going to help you by marketing in ways that we maybe haven't, because we want this to be successful. So these are our pillars. These are the things that we think we need to focus on, and we think that these things can actually help us say no to many things. So, now, how do you make the plan happen? So let's first focus on our resources. Whenever we spend money at SDF, whether it's to hire an engineer, to put together a marketing campaign, to do any of those things, we have to ask ourselves, is this spend moving us closer to the adoption of Stellar as the global payment standard? We consider that every time that we do this. So this is our question that we ask ourselves every hire that we make, all the different things that we do in the organization. And then we think about our resources. And as many of you know, this is what our resources looked like before I started this talk. So there were 105 billion lumens that existed in the world. 20 of them were out in the world. 17 were for SDF's operations, and 68 were reserved for the giveaway programs that were administered by the SDF. So Stellar isn't mined, as most of you here know. So the lumens that are now in the public hands are in the public hands because we worked really hard to get them in the public hands. And we did that over the last 4.5 years. As for the other two allocations, there's been lots of thought about how we can distribute these and how we need to work on them. But the network and the community around Stellar are different than they were when we first started. They're much more robust. And SDF can carry less weight now because of where the network is. So we're just a piece of a much larger whole. And the funds that we use, that we have, need to reflect that. And so right before this talk, we burned 50 billion lumens. And the way that that breaks down is that we burned 5 billion lumens from the SDF operating fund. So we have 12 billion there today, or now. We also eliminated the Stellar World Giveaway Program and the Partnership Program. And so 50 of those 68 billion lumens were also burned. So these are the remaining SDF lumens that exist as of this talk. So we believe that the number of lumens now better aligns with our mission. We're not going to burn any more lumens. That's an important point. So all told, as of now, there are 50 billion lumens that exist in the world. Approximately 30 billion are in the hands of SDF, and I'm going to go through how we broke those out, and 20 billion remain in the public. This new mandate reflects our desire to do more of what has worked at SDF and for Stellar, and less of what hasn't worked. So let's dive a little deeper into this. From an operations standpoint, it wasn't until really this year that we started hiring human capital, which frankly is the most important capital that we have at the SDF. It's the team of 55 people that do all of the work to help to support Stellar. And so many of the folks that were out there in the world that would have before maybe received grants, partnership grants, are now employees of the SDF and are committed to the mission of the mission of the SDF and to support Stellar. And so we're going to continue to exercise that same standard that I mentioned before, which is, does spending this lumen on our operations, on the human capital, on the office space, on marketing, on all of these different things that we need to do, is it moving us closer to Stellar becoming the global payment standard? So we're going to continue to do that with the 12 billion lumens that we have. We're also going to, and we actually are going to issue a blog post right at the end of this talk, which has a lot more detail, so that you can read about it. But we're also going to lock these lumens up for $3 billion a year for the next 4 years, so that the SDF lumens that we use for operations will release in that mechanism over that time period. So let's talk about the partnerships, what was previously the partnerships program. We've broken that up into two. So we have the ecosystem support. We have a lot of great work that's been done with respect to infrastructure grants and the community fund, and those are going to continue with 1 billion of the lumens that we have. Now, I should have also said that each of these are going to be set in accounts that are going to be public so that folks can see them, and you can see when lumens are being utilized for these different projects or these different programs that we have. And so we also have currency support for things like anchors or supporting liquidity in the market. These are things that will come out of the currency support bucket of 1 billion. And then we have this new program that is the use case investment, where we've set aside 10 billion XLM. And what that's for is 2 billion of it will be used for the SDF to be able to build new products and use cases as we help to fill in pieces of the network that we think need the support. And that'll also have its own account and be visible to folks as they go through it, as we start using the funds. And then the enterprise fund, which is a slight twist and I think a better way to think about partnership grants. Because what we can do with this enterprise fund now is we can actually take equity in companies, we can acquire companies, and we can hold them as part of this enterprise fund. But we can actually have more control and ability to dictate what happens with respect to Stellar and their use of Stellar, and the movement of those companies into and onto the Stellar network. So our intention is, and then any companies that we acquire will be held in the name of SDF, but it'll all return back into this enterprise fund, any monies that are collected as a result of it. Remember, we're a nonprofit, we're a non-shareholder. So there's no entity, there's no one person here who gets access to any of the dividends from this. But these are, I think, this is a really interesting way for us to be able to help to support the ecosystem in a different and new way. And then the old giveaway program, which frankly I think had some really wonderful success. But again, like to get the 68 more billion lumens out there in the world, it was just going to be hard given what we've already seen and the challenges that we faced, some of them just technical challenges and some of them just getting them into the hands of humans. Well, 4 billion of those are going to continue to go into the hands of humans. We're going to focus on using applications that are out there building on Stellar. Those, we can put funds into those applications so that they can actually just get into human hands and be useful to the network and to all of your work that you're doing. So that's that part of it. And then the 2 billion, as I mentioned, is marketing support. And that's marketing for Stellar, but also marketing for the partnerships that come and build on Stellar. Those businesses, those developers who are focused on building on Stellar, we're going to work with them, all of you. We're going to partner with you to actually promote all the work that you're doing. So that's what that's going to go. So here is what it looks like, again. And again, there'll be a blog post so that you can take a look at it again. This isn't the last time you'll see this. And then one question that I think we're going to have to answer is, why burn it all? Well, we didn't start by saying we wanted to burn. We actually started by saying, what do we need? What does Stellar need, and what does SDF need to be able to provide those things to Stellar? We had a very focused arrangement around only keeping what we actually could use. Because part of the challenge that we've had, and this weight, not just on Stellar, but the ecosystem, was that as much as we wanted to use the lumens that we held, it was very hard to get them into the market. So that was the first premise of why burn at all. And the second one is you don't derive a plan from some arbitrary number. And so if we just took the 105 billion lumens and then tried to derive a plan from it, that just doesn't feel like that's actually feeding the need that we have to do for the ecosystem. And so we really thought, we did a bottoms-up analysis, and we thought, what is it that we need, and then how do we get there? So that's how we approached it. And we were very careful in terms of plotting the next 10 years. So now that we have our mission, we have our pillars, these strategic pillars that can help us to say yes and no. And we have all of you and all the work that you're doing. And we have right-sized the amount of capital that we have available to us and to the ecosystem. We feel we're poised for success. So I want to say again, thank you to all of you for coming here to Mexico City to join us at Meridian. Thank you for being a part of our ecosystem. If there are any naysayers out there in the crowd, I'm happy to talk to you and convince you about the facts, the evidence, and the momentum of us moving forward, because I'm convinced. And we're going to call that an afternoon. So now I'm going to bring Jed up here, and we're going to allow questions if any of you have questions. We have about 10 minutes or so. We're taking away your happy hour time, but this is important. We'd like for Meridian to be an annual conference, yes.
Is the XLM rocket ship logo, I don't know, is that it? Asteroid mining, as an asteroid. Or Mars.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you like Stroop waffles?
I do.
Is that where the Stroop? I hate
It did come from Stroop waffles, yeah. It was the only snack we had in the early days. So.
Here's the microphone. Go ahead.
Now that it's on, okay. Now that you have right-sized, as you said, the amount of capital, and you have vested those 12 billion over the next 4 years, the natural question is, what happens after 4 years?
Well, I think that what we did is we blocked them up $3 billion a year for the next 4 years. That doesn't mean they're all going to be put into the public at that point. But I mean, honestly, the goal of the SDF was to be able to put those out as quickly as possible. And so if there's some way that we could get them out there, that would be beneficial to the network. But the 10 years, like this, you don't just blow all your capital in a 4-year period. You got to think about treasury. You got to think about how you're going to sustain an organization like this. So that's our job, like to figure that part out. It doesn't mean 4 years from now that 4 years from now we just say, all right, we're closing it down. Absolutely not. We're in this for the long haul. But we just need to think about how we're going to do that towards the future.
I think one of the most important parts of Stellar is the decentralized exchange, but I think the liquidity is so low that it needs to be boosted up. Are there any plans to incentivize market makers?
We actually already started making a market between Nigeria and the US, and that's part of the liquidity piece that I mentioned in the endpoints.
Yeah, I mean, we try to incentivize that to some degree. I mean, a lot of it will come from just getting more users on exchanges like Stellarport or StellarX, things like that. But yeah, it's a process. So.
So several years ago, you made a concerted effort to be non-for-profit. I think all of us agree that was the perfectly right decision. So what do you think is the biggest challenge and opportunity going forward to actually create an open financial global system?
Well, there's a lot of challenges. I mean, it's obviously that's a very big mission. I mean, I think one of the first things that we're trying to address is how do we achieve network effects, because this technology is not very useful unless there's a lot of different participants. So how do we get the first use cases on? And that's a lot of what we'll talk about tomorrow. So.
Yeah, I think that we call it the chicken and egg problem is the largest problem. But I feel, I don't know, and maybe I'm just drinking my own Kool-Aid here, but I do feel like we're on the precipice of success for all of those things. And then you just need to get user adoption. So I feel like we all can come together to try to make that happen, but I do think it's this whole network, like building the network in a way that is going to bring everybody to the table at the same time.
It seems like global payment rail and remittances are kind of the core use case Stellar's been solving very well. I was attracted to it because of the developer docs. Thought they were phenomenal. So what do you guys hope to see the community develop from maybe a consumer application, or what are some non-remittances or global payment style apps that you'd like to see built?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of things you can do on Stellar, and I think one of the most exciting things for me is like hearing about projects that I didn't anticipate or imagine before. Like for instance, today someone showed me this app where you could have people bid on advertising in a space. Like we could have a thing here and people could like bid on it and things like that. Like just kind of novel things that you don't really think of and are not that easy to do prior to Stellar World. So I don't really have anything in particular in mind other than just I know that I'll be surprised by the things that people build on there, and I'm excited by that. So
I think one of the things we could do better from the community standpoint is, because I don't have an application in specific, but I think the community working together to get to know more of what's happening in the community. Because I actually think that all of you can support one another. Once you find out what's happening on Stellar, like this thing that he just heard about, like we can actually build those things together. So we're going to do our own brand of like bringing the community together. But I do think it's like being inquisitive. As I mentioned this morning, why do people build on Stellar is a good question to ask, but also what are they building? And I think once you find that out, you can see that that network effect happens when you actually think about it from the community standpoint.
Hi, so we've been part of the community since 2016, and we've built a platform on top of Stellar. Now, we are based in London originally. We've just relocated to Amsterdam. And one of the things we still keep getting when we attend events or networking events in the space is we mention we're built on Stellar, and many people go like, why Stellar? Or we get the, what is Stellar? Is there any plan in the marketing for more like standardized or like, I guess, a better arrangement for companies such as ours or even other developers who actually are attending events or want to arrange events to sort of promote Stellar with official support from the SDF?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the marketing piece. It's also just part of the questions that we need to ask ourselves at SDF and ask all of you. As I just mentioned, why build on Stellar? It's different for every different use case. It's different as to the why. There are some things that are consistent. You know, the speed, the security, the scalability, all those things are consistent. But we need to figure out, like, what is the use case? Why does it work for your use case? And we then need to promote that, and so get people talking about that. So that is part of the work of our Chief Marketing Officer that we just hired. Super happy. We actually just, we closed the hire on Saturday, and he is going to start on Wednesday. So we'll have a lot of focus on that, and we'll have it in materials that everyone can use. It's not secret to us. This is like beneficial for the ecosystem at large. So we want to help you with that.
Hi guys, could you tell us a little bit more how does the regulatory thinking fit into some of the roadmap and the plans for Stellar, Interstellar? I would be curious to hear a little bit more about some of the potential hurdles that you foresee, and what are you doing to address those?
So I'll start, and Jed can jump in on this. Like from the standpoint of regulatory, like part of the hurdle that we have is that we actually haven't done the best job of it before. When we go, and I think we've gone to DC now since I've been here, I think 3 or 4 times. And when we do, and we talk to policymakers and regulators, and this is just in DC, and we need to actually make this global, because it's not just this government that's important in the United States. It's actually other governments that are equally important. But when we do, and we talk to them about Stellar and the differences, and just even the structural difference between what SDF is and then what Stellar is and what Stellar does, it's kind of like a light bulb to them, because it's unique. One of the things that I learned when I was at Mozilla that was really important is that when I would talk to regulators, and I spent a lot of my career doing that, and policymakers, it was from the standpoint of an entity that cared not just about its own products, but an entity that cared about the ecosystem at large, so the web. And, by the way, we also were building a consumer product in the market. And so it was helpful from the regulatory bodies for them to understand that. We have a very similar look and feel here. We are a nonprofit. We have the notion of not just like the success of SDF, because frankly, SDF would be nothing if Stellar wasn't successful. And so we have the focus on what Stellar is, which is all of you. And so I think that we have an opportunity to get through the first regulatory hurdle, which is the education piece. Because, as I said, and just a little bit ago, like I feel like so much of this is about blockchain and the resistance to it is because of history. And a little bit because of fear of the word blockchain, and then that cryptocurrency word gets thrown in there and everybody just doesn't know what to do. And so I think that it's these kinds of things that we need to talk through. Like the truth of the matter is the network layer doesn't have to be regulated and shouldn't. It's very much like the internet. And all of the entities that touch fiat are already regulated. And so we shouldn't have a lot of regulatory hurdles. But the focus on consumer protection for regulators, not just in the US, but outside in every other country, is a big one. And we need to tell them why that's okay, why consumers are going to be okay. And we need to show that to them. So one of the things that we pointed to in the pillars is for us to focus on to be the blockchain people know and trust. And that trust mechanism comes from also getting governments to understand that we can be trusted. Also, this network can be trusted, and the people that build on it have opportunity to be able to create that trust with their consumers. So I feel like they're hurdles, but we can achieve them. We can overcome them. And then, of course, there's like regulation, and we just need to focus on the right regulation and really advocate for the good parts and explain why the bad parts don't work.
So kind of a different kind of question. I would ask you if do you consider yourself as being an environmentally friendly and responsible enterprise because of the fact that you're doing something using a technology an algorithm that is not as power consuming as Bitcoin or other technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think of it the inverse, where like the default is to not, burn tons and tons of coal or whatever kind of power needs to power the thing. But yeah, so but we definitely have way less environmental impact than something that requires mining.
Anyone else? I can't see. Okay. Mm-hmm. No? Okay. I can't see.
Hello. Oh, like way up there.
Way up there.
Yeah. Okay, ask it.
This whole place is male dominated. If you're looking to do more marketing, if you're targeting mass adoption, you are missing half of the population. And how do you address the issue in the blockchain space? This is not just Stella conference, this is just everywhere in blockchain.
Obviously, and maybe I don't have to say this, obviously something that's near and dear to my heart. And it's not just in blockchain, it's actually in tech generally. So I've experienced it for most of my career. So I'll just say at the SDF, we're hyper-focused on inclusiveness, not just from a gender standpoint, but from lots of different ways that we think about being inclusive. And so we focus our hiring that way. I think that we would love to see more gender equality in this space. That's a lot of work that you guys need to do. She's right. You look around here, not as many women as we would like to see. We need to get that to be higher. We're going to do our part to do that by supporting all companies, not companies that are just created and developed by men, but companies that are created and developed by women and every other kind of diversity that you can think of. So that's our part, but I think it's a request to all of you to do the same. And I think that in order to make this whole ecosystem better, you do have to think representative of all the different players out there that are your ultimate consumers in the space. And I gotta say, women are an awful lot of them. So it's work that we can do collectively, and we need to spend the time and effort to do that. And we're gonna do it, so I'm committed to that ourselves.
All right, thanks everyone.
All right, thanks so much. Everybody, it's given us a lot to talk about over some drinks, which you will find where you had lunch. Thank you guys so much for a very successful day one of Meridian, and have a great time with networking and drinks.